For over 3,000 years, it sat buried beneath the desert, silent, sealed, and completely forgotten. Not a tomb, not a temple, an entire city, with streets still laid out, walls still standing, and food still sitting inside sealed jars. Experts said it was the most significant archaeological find in nearly 100 years. And the most chilling part, nobody was even searching for it. What a team of archaeologists pulled from the sands of Luxor, Egypt, shattered everything the modern world believed it knew about ancient civilization. And before this video ends, you'll understand why one of the world's most famous archaeologists stood at the edge of that dig site and whispered, almost to himself, this city should not exist. If you've ever wanted to feel what it's like to step inside a moment frozen in time, don't go anywhere. That's exactly what this is. Subscribe to the History Chronicle and hit the bell icon right now, because what you're about to hear will change the way you look at history forever. It started as a disappointment. In the fall of 2020, the legendary Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass led his team to the west bank of Luxor with a fairly simple goal: find the ruins of a mortuary temple believed to belong to the boy king Tutankhamun. It was a reasonable mission, careful, methodical, the kind of excavation that usually produces a handful of stone foundations and a published academic paper. No one on that team had any idea what was actually waiting for them underground. Within just a few days of digging, the workers began to notice something strange. As they brushed away the dry, powdery sand, they weren't hitting flat bedrock the way they expected. They were hitting walls, and not just one wall. Walls running in every direction, curving and stretching deeper and wider than anyone could explain. These walls were made of mud bricks, hand-formed from river clay thousands of years ago, and they were in remarkable condition. Then the walls just kept coming. The team picked up their pace. That electric, almost dangerous feeling that archaeologists rarely let themselves feel, the feeling that something huge is happening, started spreading through the entire group. Week after week, the shape of something massive rose from the earth. Streets, alleyways, intact doorways, thresholds that human feet had crossed more than 3,000 years ago, still solid, still perfectly in place. But what made every scientist on that dig go completely still was what they found inside the ruins. They weren't empty, they were full. Tools rested exactly where workers had set them down. Storage jars were still sealed shut. Ancient ovens still held the blackened remnants of charcoal. The crusty residue of grain clung to the insides of ceramic pots. It looked less like an archaeological site and more like the morning after something terrible. Like everyone had simply stood up mid-task and walked away without ever looking back. What had happened here? What were they actually standing inside? Zahi Hawass named it the Rise of Aten, what the rest of the world would quickly call the Lost Golden City. It had been built by Amenhotep III, a pharaoh so powerful and so wealthy that historians still struggle to find words big enough to describe his reign. He ruled Egypt from roughly 1391 to 1353 BCE. He was Tutankhamun's grandfather, and in terms of raw ambition, architectural vision, and sheer imperial dominance, he may have been the greatest ruler ancient Egypt ever produced. During the height of Amenhotep III's power, Egypt had no rivals. Gold poured in from Nubian mines in quantities that seem almost fictional today. Foreign kings sent him desperate letters begging for his friendship. He didn't just run an empire, he performed one, building temples and palaces so massive and so beautiful that their ruins still draw millions of visitors every year. And this city, this sprawling, perfectly organized buried city, was the beating heart that kept all of it running. Scholars at major universities called it the second most important archaeological find since the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb. That's not empty praise, because a tomb tells you how the powerful died. This city tells you how everyone lived. What made the architecture feel almost supernatural was its preservation. In some areas, the walls still stood nearly 3 meters high. You could walk through actual doorways. You could stand inside rooms that hadn't held a single breath of human air in 3,000 years. You could read the layout of the neighborhood as clearly as reading a modern city map. Homes here, factories over there, government buildings in that corner. And the design of the walls themselves was like nothing archaeologists had seen before in ancient Egypt. Running along the outer faces of many buildings was a strange zigzag pattern, a snaking back-and-forth line that gave the structures an almost alive, restless quality. No other Egyptian city of that era had been built this way. Researchers debated what it meant. Was it structural, giving the soft mud brick extra resistance against desert winds? Was it symbolic, a representation of water or eternity, or the protection of the gods? Or was it simply the signature of a civilization that wanted its greatest city to look like absolutely nothing else in the world? Nobody has solved that riddle yet. Now here is where the story stops being about stones and starts being about people. In the southern part of the city, the team uncovered something that felt almost overwhelming in its everyday simplicity. A kitchen, not a modest little cooking space. A massive industrial food operation with row after row of ovens, enormous sealed storage jars, and clear evidence that this complex had fed hundreds of workers and officials every single day. And then came the jar that stopped everyone cold. One particular storage vessel, when carefully cleaned, revealed an inscription carved into its surface. The text identified the contents as dressed meat, prepared for a royal celebration by a man whose name was recorded clearly for anyone who could read it. A butcher who had done his job sealed his jar and gone home, never knowing that 34 centuries later, someone would still be able to read his name. Think about what that means. This wasn't a king. This wasn't a god. This was a working man, and he survived. His name survived. His work survived. History, for one quiet, stunning moment, became completely personal. Throughout the residential neighborhoods, the team kept finding more of the same. The humble, human debris of ordinary lives. Bone needles worn smooth from years of daily use. Stone weights from weaving looms. Small clay amulets that people carried close to their bodies to keep evil spirits away. Tiny objects that children played with. Cosmetic containers still holding the chemical traces of ancient oils and pigments, preserved perfectly by the bone-dry desert air. These weren't the belongings of gods or royalty. These were real people. People who worked and worried and loved and hoped, and their entire world had been sitting in the dark, waiting, perfectly intact, for someone to come back for it. But in the northern part of the city, the team found something that no one had prepared themselves to see. The northern district felt different the moment you entered it. The walls were heavier, the buildings were larger, the entrances were reinforced. This wasn't where families lived. This was where the city's real power operated. Workshop after workshop had been preserved under the sand, each one built for a different specialty. Molds for casting sacred scarab beetles and small divine figurines. Ceramic kilns. Evidence of blast production so advanced that historians had previously assumed it was rare for that era. And scattered throughout, official clay seals, stamped with the name of Amenhotep III himself. This wasn't just a settlement. It was a royal supply chain, the largest ancient industrial complex ever uncovered in Egypt, producing luxury goods that went directly into the pharaoh's palaces and temples. And then the team found what was beneath the floors, inside one of the ordinary residential homes. Not a tomb, not a sacred space, not anywhere that burials were supposed to happen. They found human remains, but the body hadn't been placed with ceremony or care, the way Egyptian culture absolutely demanded. The arms were straight, the knees were pressed tightly together and tied. This person had not been given a proper farewell. They had been placed under the floor of a house, quickly, almost desperately, as if someone had run out of time and options. Why? Then, in the section next door, the bones of cattle, buried inside living spaces, not in stables or sacred enclosures, inside homes, placed with clear intention, as though someone had decided in a single urgent moment that the only way to protect these rooms was through a ritual that left behind no written explanation at all. The archaeologists couldn't answer it, not then, not completely even now. What they could say was, this. Something happened in this city, something that made people bury bodies under their floors, something that forced them to seal their workshops, abandon their tools mid-task, lock their kitchens, and walk away, and never come back. What could possibly drive an entire civilization to abandon a city this powerful, this complete, this alive? To understand that, you have to understand the man who came after Amenhotep III. His name was Akhenaten, And he may be the most extreme ruler in the entire span of recorded human history. He was Amenhotep's son. He grew up inside this golden empire, walked these very streets, breathed this city's air. And when he finally took the throne, he did something so radical, so shocking, so completely without precedent that even today historians struggle to fully process it. He banned the gods, not one minor deity, all of them. The entire ancient religious system that had given Egyptian civilization its identity, its comfort, and its purpose for thousands of years, declared false, finished, forbidden. There was only one god now, Akhenaten announced. The sun disk, the Aten, and only Akhenaten himself could speak to it directly. Imagine what that felt like to the people in this city. Every priest lost their role overnight. Every temple was locked. Every craftsman in that northern quarter who had spent their entire life carving sacred figurines and divine symbols, suddenly a criminal. The magnificent city of Amenhotep III, this pulsing, productive, extraordinary place, became a monument to a belief system the new pharaoh wanted buried and forgotten. So the order came down. Leave. All of it. Now. And they did. Every worker, every official, every butcher and seamstress and jeweler and record-keeper packed up and moved to Akhenaten's new capital out in the desert, a city called Amarna. The workshops were sealed shut. The entrances to official buildings were stamped closed with clay seals. Seals that researchers actually found still in place when they excavated those doorways thousands of years later. The food was left in the jars. The tools stayed on the floors. And 3,000 years of silence began. Here is where the story twists in a way that most history books skip entirely. Akhenaten's revolution failed. It lasted barely 17 years. When he died, the priests and the nobles and the ordinary Egyptian people, every soul who had quietly kept their old prayers alive in secret, came surging back. A teenage boy was placed on the throne to undo everything Akhenaten had destroyed. Tutankhamun. Evidence found inside this very city suggests that Tutankhamun actually intended to come back here, to rebuild it, to use it as the base for restoring the old faith his grandfather had celebrated. This is precisely the area where researchers had originally been searching for his mortuary temple. His presence, his plans, his hope for a restoration are all faintly visible in the archaeological record. He never got the chance. Tutankhamun died young, shockingly, heartbreakingly young, still a teenager, under circumstances that remain disputed to this day. And with him died the last real hope of bringing this city back to life. The rulers who followed had different priorities. The city was never reclaimed. It was never demolished. It was never built over. It simply sat there, year after year, century after century. As the sand drifted in and the world moved on and the memory of it slowly dissolved into nothing. Think carefully about what that means. Every civilization that rose and fell in the centuries that followed, every Roman soldier, every medieval traveler, every modern tourist who photographed the temples of Luxor, walked within a few meters of this place, and not one of them knew it was there. The city didn't vanish because it was destroyed. It vanished because it was forgotten by everyone who was supposed to remember it, until a team went looking for something else entirely, pushed a shovel into the ground, and changed everything. A professor of Egyptology at Johns Hopkins University said it simply, "This is the second most important discovery since the tomb of Tutankhamun." But here's why it might actually matter more. Tutankhamun's tomb told us how a king died and what treasures he carried into the afterlife. It told us about gold and ritual and royal power. This city tells us something far more rare. It tells us how ordinary people actually lived. It gives us a butcher's name on a jar. It shows the wear marks on a needle held by a seamstress every day for years. It shows us where children played and where workers ate their meals and what a neighborhood looked like when the greatest empire on earth was simply having a regular afternoon. Almost every book ever written about ancient Egypt was built primarily on evidence from death, tombs, mummies, burial rituals. This city is built entirely on evidence of life, and that changes the entire picture. Only a small portion of the site has been uncovered so far. The team believes the city extends far beyond what has been excavated, deeper to the west, further north, into districts that may hold diplomatic records, government archives, perhaps even written accounts from the people who lived through Akhenaten's revolution. And Researchers are now using ground scanning technology to map what still lies hidden beneath the surface. Buildings, rooms, and streets that no living person has ever seen. And here is the thought that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. This city survived for over 3,000 years not because it was guarded or protected. It survived because it was left alone. The cruelty of one pharaoh's decree, the tragedy of a teenager dying before he could finish what he started, the indifference of centuries of people who walked right over it, all of it by some impossible accident of history, combined to create a single miraculous outcome. The city should not exist. The desert should have destroyed it. Looters should have found it. Later builders should have torn it apart for materials. None of that happened. It waited, quiet, patient, completely still, for 3,000 years, until the moment the world was finally ready to find it. That is the story of the lost golden city of Luxor, a discovery that didn't just rewrite one chapter of history. It opened an entirely new book. Here at the History Chronicle, we go after the stories that make the ancient world feel real, the details that textbooks leave out, the moments where dead civilizations suddenly feel like living, breathing people standing right next to you. If this story moved you even a fraction of how much it moved us, subscribe. Turn on notifications, because the next story we're bringing you goes somewhere even stranger and even harder to explain. The past is not done with us yet, and we are not done with it. We'll see you there.